Hey everyone, welcome to the Doctors Running podcast, where we, a group of doctors of physical therapy, talk about the art and the science of the things that we put on our feet. Today, I'm your host, Matt, hosting with the ever awesome Dr. David Salas here, who's joining me. And what we are going to do is try to condense down a very complex topic. We are starting to realize that as we are looking through the year of shoes that have come out, that there are many companies who have a lot of shoes in their lineup. In fact, many more than I think ever in the past. And one of the big ones that we wanted to start with was ASICS. So we have tons of stuff that we're going to go through. So we're going to have our traditional training shoes, both traditional, like the kind of inline and premium. We'll talk about stability trainers. We're going to talk about the lightweight performance trainers, or some what David often calls like the companion shoes. And I got to give you credit for that. We'll talk about racing flats, and we'll talk about a last category that we are trying to decide where these go, because they seem to check off a lot of different boxes. So let's jump in, David, if you're okay with that, into the bread and butter of ASICS shoes, which is the Gel Cumulus 26 and the Gel Nimbus 26. So what do you want to tell us first about these two shoes and kind of where they fit?
Yeah, I think first off, these have kind of been some of the flagship type models we've seen from the company. They're on the 26th version now on both of these, so they're long-standing shoes. Traditionally, when we looked at the ASICS Cumulus, that has always been kind of like their normal neutral trainer, with the Nimbus being the premium trainer to that. In recent years, we have seen a lot of changes to both of those models. And for the listeners, Matt is holding up the shoes right now. And the Cumulus has kind of always been, and again, this is not the current model, but traditionally it's always kind of been that neutral high drop kind of trainer. But they shifted that quite a bit. And now the new Cumulus is a little bit more of a flatter geometry through the heel and midfoot, but has a sharper toe spring up front. They now integrate it with Pure Gel midsole and Blast Plus midsole. And it's a rubberized DVA outsole, which is the first time they've done that, right? They've never done that before in the Cumulus line, to my knowledge.
The goal of that, yeah, they've always had outsoles for sure, decent ones. And then they went to the rubberized one, which was supposed to cut some weight off, but I have just ended up chewing through it. So that's just me, though. So I'm probably not the best match for this shoe. Anyway.
And then that one is going to be pretty close to your 40 millimeters of stack, a little bit underneath, actually. I think it's like 38 in the heel. And then when we look at the Nimbus, again, that's the premium training model. So that one's a little bit higher than 40 now, which is kind of wild to think that that's just kind of normal for the premium trainers now, because that is pretty high up, you know? So if we're looking at give or take 42 millimeters of stack, and that one's also a blend of Pure Gel and Blast Plus Eco. So the main idea of these shoes is to kind of be that workhorse daily trainer for you that you go and you just pound miles away on. And I think for the most part, they get the job done. But they, like you said, the Cumulus, you kind of chew through a little bit. So it's kind of surprising to see a rubberized EVA on a workhorse neutral shoe. Whereas you have the AHAR Plus, I think, on the Nimbus there, which is the high abrasion rubber from the company. But Nimbus is kind of more of a normal rocker experience, high stack. Cumulus is very forefoot forward, where it's that sharper toe spring up front. But yeah, what do you think?
The Nimbus has been really good. I think they got the heel bevel a little better. It's definitely that flagship daily training shoe that's maximally stacked. That's now actually like above what we consider kind of max stack. We're getting above that 40 millimeters in one of the shoes, along with several others that have gone that direction. So you want soft cushioning. This of the group is probably one of the best ones. The Cumulus is weird to me because it's it's one of the lighter neutral daily training shoes out there. I just had trouble with this because the toe spring is so sharp, it shortens the shoe. So I would consider going a half size up, and that might fix it. But I kind of had limited miles because durability wasn't super hot. This felt a little bit short, but it was great because, and this is maybe a little challenge, is this seems to overlap in a lot of the performance trainers where it's actually light enough that it sits with them. But if you also compare this to your Novablast and even almost your Magicspeed, that they're kind of in the similar weight range, and this actually turns over really well. The previous one did as well, but it's just so rockered now. It's very different, where I can't believe I'd say the Nimbus is less rockered than that, because kind of like one of your flagship maximalist shoes, Cumulus is really rockered. And so there's a lot of overlap. And I'd say if you just are okay with the shoe that's just a little bit short, you want a shoe that's also pretty affordable coming in. It's $140, right? Am I saying that right?
Yeah. It's $140. So not
definitely
a bad
one of the, I never thought I would say this, one of the cheaper models out there that still has a good ride and kind of can have some versatility. That's where the Cumulus is sitting. But it's just a teeny bit snug. But your Nimbus is you're like, hey, I really want a shoe that I can walk all day in, that I can stand all day in, that like that soft running experience as well. It really checks those boxes up well. This is one that we generally suggest when people ask us about walking and standing shoes. It's a really, really good option because also has, even though it's so soft, just some inherent geometrical ways that make it a little bit inherently stable, not a stability shoe by any means. So of the two of these, I think for a couple extra bucks, I'm personally going to choose the Nimbus, because it really stands out a lot from a lot of the different models. So there's one that has some overlap, but I still think does better than this. But yeah, the Cumulus is the weird one where there's some shoes that kind of fit a lot of those boxes. The other shoe that fits in this category that we did initially mention is now the new Glideride Max that just came out, which is a little bit higher stack height. Correct me if I'm wrong, Davidson, 44 millimeters in the heel. Did I say that right?
Is it that high? It might be. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So 44 millimeters in the heel. It's just, it kind of is a weird shoe this year. It's 44 or 38. It was 6 millimeter drop. Previous versions of this were really stiff in the forefoot, and they were really great for people that needed a shoe with a really significant forefoot rocker. And while there's still a lot of toe spring, and there is a plate in this now, it's an EVA plate. There's
a hard pressed EVA.
Actually some like more flexibility than I would expect for a shoe with this much stack and a EVA plate in it as well. So I think this kind of sits weird, even though it's higher stack, it's a little bit firmer than the Nimbus for me. So it sits weirdly between the Cumulus and Nimbus. So I think if you're trying to decide, if you're like, hey, I just need a little bit more room, I just want a teeny bit more stiffness than the Cumulus has, but maybe not as cushioned or as soft as the Nimbus, then maybe this might be an option. But for those looking for hey, I want the really solid rocker, this is unfortunately not going to provide that anymore, but it still sits a little close to the Nimbus as being that more premium, a little bit more expensive, sitting at 160. So it's actually a little more expensive than the Nimbus, which I realized it's 170. Just a little bit more premium, higher stack shoe for those that want maybe just a little bit more room, because there actually is a little bit more room than some of the other models, and ASICS sometimes runs a little bit more narrow. What did you think about this? Do you think that's an accurate description, or you have a different comparison of the Glideride Max in this kind of traditional category?
Yeah, no, I think that was actually a really good comparison. I think one the things that I've always associated with the Glideride series is that really stiff, highly rockered forefoot. And we usually would recommend that for people that had either hallux rigidus or they had, some Achilles issues sometimes. That kind of goes away in this, that hard press EVA. Even though it's plated, it's actually under load. It's decently flexible. You know, dare I say it might even be more flexible than the Nimbus. But it is rockered a little bit more than the Nimbus up front. But yeah, it's one of those things where if you want to kind of have that toe spring, but then have a little bit of flexibility in that toe spring, which is a pretty niche crowd, but some people like that. I actually do like that in designs when I'm running a little bit easier. So I actually have liked the Glideride Max. It's not going to be a shoe that agrees with everyone, but it kind of went away from the roots of the Glideride there, where it's like that has always been that real stiff shoe up front, to where it's like almost like, is this thing carbon plated? And it's not. It was always this plastic plate, but it was a really hard plastic plate. So now it's just kind of more of like a neutral premium trainer, really. But it has a nice upper. It has a decent amount of volume. I think the tongue, to me, felt a little bit more fluid and less bitey than the Nimbus. Between the two, I think I actually do lean towards the Glideride Max, but not necessarily for the reasons that the Glideride Max got its name, or, for how it established its line, or its place in the lineup, shall I say, with that real stiff forefoot. I kind of like that sharper toe spring with that slight flexibility. To me, that makes it just a nice natural toe off, and it feels really nice to me, but it's not that stiff experience that it used to be.
I think for that reason, if I was going to put these on like the more like kind of your more simple to more cushion, I'd put the Cumulus as like a little bit more of the versatile shoe of this range, where it's definitely lighter, rolls a little bit more, a little bit snappier of the two, just because of that lightness as well. And if you want, it's a really good deal at 140, but 140. The Glideride Max sits between these, but sits closer to the Nimbus as the more premium of these, more foam underfoot, a little bit stiffer. But the Nimbus is the one going, hey, you want the softest ride? You want a shoe that's actually going to work well for those with toe mobility deficits and want a decent rocker off the front? Nimbus is going to be better. But if you want that kind of smoother riding, just a touch of flexibility with a good amount of stack, maybe the Glideride Max is the better option in this lineup of shoes.
I'd say a little less structured too. I think the Nimbus feels a little bit more structured as well. So a little less going on from the sole flare and sidewalls and everything. Like this is kind of more a true neutral.
I'm glad that you said that because I always felt like the Nimbus
that for the listeners being the Glideride Max. I didn't specify.
For those, I actually had like not an argument but disagreement with Nathan because I found the Nimbus to actually be slightly stable neutral, and he's like, "Are you like serious?" And just because of the sidewalls, this geometry, actually, even though it's so soft, it actually works for someone like me. Whereas the Glideride Max, because it doesn't have a lot of those features, didn't work as well from a guidance standpoint. So that's very validating. Anyway, let's move on to our stability category, which I feel like is like the smallest ASICS has had. Normally, ASICS is really known for their stability stuff, and their stability shoes are some of the top ones on the market right now. And I will say that confidently. There's still some good stuff out there. It's just a lot less. We lost shoes for those that even remember this, like the DS Trainer, the DS Racer, which were there. Actually, DS Trainer was here until not too long ago, and then they got rid of it as a mild stability, lightweight trainer / racer. The DS Racer was a shoe I used a lot in college. I really miss that shoe. But the GT 2013 and the ASICS Kayano 31 are now your two stability shoes in the lineup. And they fortunately do cover quite a bit of area. The GT 2013, I feel like David and I have had this conversation several times where it's like a GOAT stability shoe at this point. It's such a good shoe in the fact that they redid so much where brought it up to speed. It is also one of the lighter stability shoes out there. It can definitely handle some up-tempo stuff. It's not a racing shoe, but it can definitely move if you need to, but also just chews up miles really well. Great durability. I almost have 100 miles in my pair, and this is my left shoe, by the way. So for those watching on YouTube, this should blow you away. The outsole is still intact. A little bit more snug, really great price. What was the price again? It's still like in
$140, I think.
Yeah, that's a great price for this shoe that has this durability, this versatility, can handle quite a bit. Good, I think, not as great as the Kayano for walking, but as a good starting stability shoe, walking wise is really good. The interesting thing, though, it's more of a mild to moderate stability shoe, not being moderate, in my opinion. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on that in the GT 2000.
Yeah, I think with the GT 2000, I agree with the mild to moderate appraisal there. I think it's mild until it becomes moderate. And the reason why it becomes moderate is, I think, partially the stack height. It's not quite as high up as a lot of these other shoes. You have thick rubber coverage. You get a lot of ground feel. So this shoe doesn't feel like a lot of these other training shoes on the market right now. They put the Blast Plus midsole in there, which is in a lot of the models, but for whatever reason, this one feels like it just absorbs that load pretty well. They have some gentle sidewalls. They have some gentle sole flaring more than the other models that we just showed you. And they have that what they call the 3D guidance system. When you kind of load it, it's meant to just be a little bit adaptive to how you load the shoe to kind of just get you forward. But it's all gentle stuff, and I think for the most part it's mild, but because it's not quite as high up and that traction's so good and the upper lockdown's good, it comes off quite stable, and I think that's what kind of makes it into that moderate category, where it's not that there's so much other things going on. I think it's just kind of like that last little bit gets it over the edge. But this has been a very solid workhorse trainer. I think I have 100 on mine too, and this thing has hardly a dent on it. It's crazy. And I just did 17 this morning in them. I've had 119 and 117 mile run in them with no issues. But yeah, it's kind of a traditional training shoe feel. It's not really like overly plush in any areas. It's a somewhat simple shoe in a lot of ways. No plates. Kind of Blast Plus now seems to kind of be the standard for them. I mean, that's like across almost every model at this point. So kind of a standard foam there, high abrasion rubber. They have those flex grooves, so you have a little bit of flexibility there. And a little bit more flexibility, I'd say, than some of the other models because there's just less foam too. When there's that much foam, those platforms get really rigid too. So if you kind of want more of that natural feeling shoe, but you need structure, like if those lower riding, flexible, natural feeling shoes are a little much for you, but you need a little bit of structure, this can actually give you that, which kind of gives it a unique place, I think, in the stability training world. Like you said, it's kind of one of the lighter options.
I agree on two fronts. It's unique in the ASICS lineup because it's very specific. Like, and I will bring up the Kayano 31 in just a second, but it's very specific. We were talking in the neutral ones, like, there's some overlap here. Like, kind of not sure where the G2013 is like. This is where I stand. I am the not maximal stack height, although stack height's certainly harder than it used to be. I'm the not maximal stack height. I'm the simple stability shoe. Like, and GT. I don't remember what that stands for. I don't want to steal this from Brooks because I know they used to say the GTS was go-to stability. GT go-to makes sense in this shoe. It's just the thing that I think David and I, hopefully I'm not speaking for you, but it's a shoe I just grab. As someone who needs a little bit of stability, if I'm just doing an easy run and I don't really have anything else to test, I'm going to grab that because I can rely on it. And I know what I'm going to get. I know it's not going to feel weird or mushy if I don't want it to feel too high. It's not too low. There's just a little bit of flexibility. I can pick up the pace a little bit. It covers a lot of boxes and doesn't have a lot of overlap with a lot of the other shoes in both this lineup as well as the rest of the market, which is kind of nice, actually.
When I hear GT, I actually think of like Grand Tour, like just kind of like that smooth experience, like you see in cars and things.
Somebody in the comments, let us know what GT stands for in this case. I feel like we should know that, but I don't.
We should, and I don't know either. Yeah.
All right. Well, that makes me feel better. So going on to the Kayano 31, which is another staple shoe on the market that's been around, obviously, a long time. This is your moderate stability premium daily training shoe that has been redone quite a bit compared to previous versions. It does have tons of guidance methods now. So very wide sole, wide midfoot, significant sidewalls. They did something different where they had what's called 4D guidance, where you've got the internal geometry, but this medial piece is actually softer and more bouncy, which is a very interesting sensation when you actually hit it, where when you go into this, it actually bounces you back out, which it's very interesting. It's not the most overt thing and takes a while to break in, but this is another shoe that I really, as a go-to, suggest to people. If you're working in healthcare, for example, this has been a great shoe if you have to be on your feet all day, if you need just a little bit of stability without something that's jamming into your arch, which is really good. If you need a shoe that's like you can handle long distances and just daily training, but you want something softer, more premium. It's also a little bit wider, which is very surprising for ASICS. You need a little more room. Mm-hmm. This is also really good, which very much is different from the GT. So these don't have a lot of overlap. They do stability differently, where the GT really, I can feel that medial pressure, even though it's supposed to be guided. Kayano, I don't feel that as much, but my foot feels very centered and stable, which is nice. The Kayano is much softer. It's not as versatile into speed. It's heavier. The GT is the faster shoe of these because it's lighter. But that's great because these are very different shoes. And they're also pretty different on the market. So same thing. So stability category, as always, ASICS, I mean, not as always, they're doing a lot better now. There's a couple years where I don't think it was as good. But they're really doing very well now. I just wish that they had like a lightweight stability racer or something like that. I feel like of anyone.
Yeah, if they could bring back the DS racer. I had a pair of those. I remember those.
Those are sick.
Those were fun.
So yeah, ASICS, if you're listening to this, please bring back the DS racer.
A lot of people would race marathons in those too.
Oh yeah, it was a great shoe for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I raced a half marathon and they're great. They're awesome. So yeah, bring back. I was
far from marathon racing at that point in my life, but
ASICS Metaspeed DS racer would be sweet. It would be great. So yeah, stability lineup, not a lot of overlap with the rest of the stuff here, and very unique even between both models. Where we start to see a little somewhat overlap is moving into the performance trainer realm, where we have the Noosa Tri, which I feel like is a shoe that people don't talk about as much because this is actually the cheapest of this line. It's $135, which is awesome for how durable and how this is really versatile. It's actually also one of the lighter options in this lineup. And then you also have the Magicspeed 4, which is the opposite to me, where I'm super confused by this shoe. And so I definitely want to talk about that. But which one do you want to go through first? Maybe do positive or first?
Dang. You're just going to go positive to meh?
I'm going to throw that down.
We can start off with the Noosa. I think the Noosa is a pretty simplistic shoe. That's kind of always what it's been. Just that lightweight, neutral, relatively low to the ground. Now it has more stack. All of them have more stack than they used to. I feel like that's almost can go without saying at this point, but it's still a lower stack than the other shoes. It's very moderate stack height, Blast Plus midsole, very gentle kind of sole frame, but again, neutral shoe through and through. Very breathable air mesh, decent volume, wide forefoot, a little bit flexible up front, a lot flexible up front. but a slightly sharper toe spring up front too. So, hey, actually I love the Noosa, and I was telling you the Glideride Max too kind of gives you a little bit of a similar-ish experience in the forefoot, just very different shoes. The Noosa is in that 7-ounce range, very light. There's no plate. There's not that much frills on this, but it does have good traction underfoot, and it can do a little bit of everything you need it to do. I've hit hard track workouts in these just fine, and also done tempo runs and things like that. And I've done easy day too. This is meant to be kind of that lightweight, versatile Swiss Army knife kind of shoe. And it's been a long-standing favorite for doctors of running, and I feel like it still continues to be worth talking about. And yeah, at 135, it does make it very hard to beat.
It's awesome. There's another shoe out there that we haven't reviewed in a little bit called the ASICS Hyperspeed, which is now on version 4. That's a very different shoe than the Noosa Tri because that's a teeny bit light, not that much lighter, but it's also a much lower stack and is really meant purely as a racing flat. Whereas the Noosa Tri just does such a good job of that simple, lightweight, affordable, lightweight trainer that you could easily race in. You could easily use many people can use as a trainer if you just want something lighter and more simple. It's got just enough room. It's also got an absolutely awesome upper. It's one of the few shoes that can truly handle sockless running. But this really of this lightweight trainer category really shines for me personally just because it's so simple and just checks off boxes so well in how it does that. Now, not to be a negative Nancy, the Magicspeed 4 is a weirder shoe for me. So this one is the carbon-plated lightweight trainer of the group. It's meant to be either a companion shoe or like your workout shoe, or for those that find maybe the Metaspeed series too aggressive, something you can lean back on that's not as aggressive. And this shoe has changed so much. Version 3 was actually awesome. It was a great, in my opinion, racing flat for a lot of different distances that still had some bounce to it and was a great, really good alternative. And easily exchangeable, I think, for a lot of the Metaspeed series at the time. This one got super stacked, so it's over 40 millimeters in the heel, not so much in the forefoot. Full length carbon fiber plate. There is Flight Foam Turbo in the center, matched with Flight Foam Blast Plus. Why am I forgetting this? David,
yeah, it should be Blast Plus.
Yeah, Blast Plus. Which weirdly enough,
Blast Plus.
I was expecting this to be softer. It's very firm and stiff. So even though this was meant as a lightweight trainer, did not enjoy it as a training shoe. It does break in after a while, but it's really stiff, tall, and heavier than I would expect for a shoe in this category. So I'm really confused. This is hey, you just want a stiff shoe. It's not that stable too because it's super high and super narrow. You just want to have that carbon fiber stiffness. You want a firmer or stiffer shoe. And maybe you just like that for training. Maybe you like this as a racing shoe because the Metaspeed series is too light or aggressive. And maybe the Superblast is more money than you want to spend. This is kind of where this is. But to me, this shoe is weird because it has a lot of overlap with the Superblast that we'll talk about. And I personally would choose the Noosa Tri over this because the shoe is so stiff and feels more firm than responsive. I would choose the Noosa Tri if I was trying to run fast. But that's me. It does better over longer distances. So that maybe because I'm not looking at marathons, maybe I'm not paying attention to this shoe as much as like a long run or workout shoe. But I'm just kind of confused by it still. This is one where I think there's a lot of overlap, and I'm curious to know what you think about it.
Yeah, I agree in some areas, and I don't in others.
Sweet.
But I think looking at it from a transition standpoint, I think it's not really the shoe that's meant for you. You land pretty hard on the heel, and like you said, it's a very high up, very narrow platform, and that's just going to give you a lot of problems if you land that way. And it's a little bit of a flatter geometry in the heel too. That's another one of those shoes where it's very forefoot forward, where sharper toe spring, very stiff carbon plate, a little bit of a narrow platform with that deep cut down the midline. Those who have like really neutral mechanics and are a little bit more midfoot forward on their landing, they're probably going to do a little bit better in that shoe. I enjoyed the shoe. I didn't dislike it, but I agree. I do feel like that toe spring's a little bit too sharp, especially for faster things. It's almost like it's like I'm fighting myself almost. I can't push off the ground because I'm rolling off of it too quickly. But at like marathon, half marathon kind of efforts, I feel like the shoe actually responds pretty well. And I think it's a decent training companion. I don't think I don't know if it is the best training companion on the market, but I don't know if it's necessarily deserving of negative press either. But I will say it is a lot firmer than I thought it would be too. When we got it, ironically, the one that was Blast Plus, which was the third version, that one felt softer, like you said, than this one. And this one is Turbo and Blast Plus, and it's higher up. And so maybe some of it's just the alignment of where the plate is. I'm not sure, but it definitely feels firm. Like that thing feels pretty firm. But if you load it in the right way and you land in a certain, with a certain mechanics, I think it would come off with a decently lively toe off and be a nice training companion for the half and the full, maybe even a racing shoe for those that like that, but don't necessarily want to either spend the money on a super shoe or also just like a little bit more of a training shoe feel versus the PIBA based stuff. But yeah, I think it's still a worthy training companion. But I agree, out of the two, if I'm picking my favorite out of the two, it's going to be the Noosa. I think the Noosa is, again, very versatile, very friendly on foot. I think it can take a little bit of everything, where the Magicspeed is a little bit more of a niche and a specific use.
I would totally agree. Are we good to move on to one of my favorite categories?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sweet. So the super shoe of ASICS is going to be the ASICS Metaspeed Edge Paris and the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris. Did I get that right? Yes, I actually did. Wow, this is great. For those who can't see this, they look very similar. There are some pretty. I mean, if I was looking at the outsole, then that's how I usually tell without looking too deeply, because the current the red or orange or whatever color, the Sky has the similar outsole, whereas the Edge has the black outsole. So both these are night and day better than the last versions. They are some of the lightest super shoes on the market, obviously before things like the Evo Pro or the Pro Evo one, and then the 361 Miro that we talked about recently. These are the lightest kind of really commercially available shoes. I really enjoy the Edge. The Paris has also been a really great option, just doesn't match my mechanics as well. They have full length Flight Foam Turbo Plus. They're both $250. They have different geometries, and that's kind of really, the Edge is meant to be that shoe that kind of rolls a little bit. I don't know if I'd say cadence is really the thing, but just in terms of how you load the shoe is different. Like, I'm more of a heel striker and I kind of roll a little bit more. So the Edge works really well for me. I found that those who can really smash into the ground, load the forefoot really well, I tend to like the Sky a little bit. And David, I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. But the Edge has been, I think we'll have to see, because some shoes got in the way of this, but it's been my shoe of the year. I've raced the most. I've raced the fastest in this shoe, and I really liked it. But I like these. They are not stable, unfortunately, but they are definitely worth that $250, because they have some of the best foams. They have some of the best rides, and there's traction, a lot of versatility in both of them. But yeah, curious to get your thoughts of, like, if you want to race fast, these are really great options.
Yeah, and that's the whole idea, right? Make it as light as possible, put the most responsive foam in there, the stiffening agents, get you an experience that you can run really fast in. It's not a marketing plug. That's every single racing shoe on the market for every company. I agree. The Edge Paris has kind of been my racing shoe of the year up to this point. That might change very shortly. There's another shoe that I'm liking a lot right now, but that is not a discussion for right now. I agree. I feel like the Sky is very forefoot forward. It's a sharper little toe spring at the very end, a little bit of a flatter plate, right? Not quite as spooned out. And I feel like you really got to smash that thing to get the best experience out of it. And ironically, I feel like when I'm running quicker, I actually run a little bit more similar to you. I do heel strike a decent amount. I don't, maybe not quite as hard, but I
based on our outsole weight.
but I do, and I do feel like I like that little bit drop in the plate on the Edge. I like that it's a little bit more gradual there, and I think I respond really well to it. It's, again, not the most stable, very neutral. I mean, this is probably the closest comparison to the Vaporfly at the moment, where you kind of have that thin last through the midfoot, a little bit of a wider forefoot with good traction, and then just kind of a heel that's there. But yeah, I think for $250, I think I have 70-ish miles on these, and it, again, doesn't look like I made much of a dent at all. And I've been trying to be sparing on these. That number could be way higher, because I do really like these shoes. I've just been saving them for special efforts. So, also, fun fact, this is a little tape right here on the medial part where the yellow part is. That's not, I started ripping it off the other day on accident.
Oh yeah, mine has been coming off too. I think it's just like getting delaminated a little bit. But
Yeah.
I think these are really worth the money. Obviously, all super shoes are expensive, but these have a very set place in the line. They are completely different. The Magicspeed 4 is not similar to these at all. The Noosa is not similar to this at all. These are going to have a very unique place. You want to run fast, this is where these two shoes are going to go. They're also very unique on the market because it's very hard to find shoes that are similar to them. I think the Vaporfly is actually different. Yes, it is comparable, but the Vaporfly, in my opinion, is much softer and it's much less. The platform is much more narrow. I like the Edge a lot more than the Vaporfly, but I'm also someone who doesn't typically get along with Vaporflies right now.
But out of the super shoe market, those are probably the two narrow ones of the bunch.
I would definitely agree with that. But again, being this light as the commercially, like probably one of the widest available commercially light shoes, commercially available super shoes, they're two of the best on the market. It really comes down to your mechanics. I'm very curious to hear comments, by the way, about people having tried both and figure out which one works better for them. I've seen a variety on elite athletes and a variety from people running at races about both the Edge and the Sky. So I think they have worthy places here as clear racing flats. It doesn't have a lot of overlap in not only the rest of the line, but again, I'll say this, not a lot of overlap in the rest of the industry because they're quite unique in their design and differentiation.
Yeah, and the Turbo Plus midsole is interesting, where very bouncy, but much firmer than a lot of the other Puma midsoles. So if you like that kind of firmer feel to it, like you're going to get that in these. So when I said the Vaporfly comment, I meant more so in like shoe shaping. I do agree with you that they are different, but they're both very, very neutral. You know, where like some of the other super shoes are starting to get more and more built up to kind of help with some of the stability and really focus at the marathon, where like the Edge Paris might not be the marathon shoe for everyone. You know, it's just not the most structured, you know, but as a 5K, 10K shoe, I think a lot of people will really like whichever one works better for them. They're both really good. For me, I think half marathon for sure, Edge Paris could do it. Marathon, I'm still thinking myself too. I'm like, if I run a conservative, well-controlled, well-executed marathon, I think I'd be all right. But if I go out a little too hot and I start breaking my mechanics and I start getting tired, like I might start fighting that shoe, you know? So I don't know if it's really the right marathon shoe for me either.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you where they're very light, and because they're so light, I find that these have worked better for me for like 5K, 10K. I have not tried a half. I think that I might be able to get the Sky. No, I found the Sky less stable to me. Like the forefoot's really good, but because I load the heels so much, the heels and midfoot's a little bit narrower in the Sky. At least it feels like it. The Edge, though, I might be able to get to a half, but to me, marathon, I'm going to need something a little bit more structured. That's a little bit more, or like kind of overtly stable, like some sidewalls or things like, or like wider midfoot. But for those with neutral mechanics and you want the lightest thing, there's no reason why you can't use this for marathon distance, because it's actually obviously a max stack height shoe. You just got to find out, do you need a little bit more structure? Now, there's a good alternative to those. So if those people are really sticking to ASICS and maybe you're going, hey, what kind of marathon shoe might work for me? I'm going to bring up the last two options as the ones who are kind of having a hard time categorizing. Yes, they are very much performance shoes. They're also extremely high stack height. So we're talking about the Superblast 2 and the Novablast 4, which have been incredibly popular models. So it's interesting that like Dave and I are going, where do we put these? Like, I think they're performance trainers, but both of them are really like, especially the Superblast is technically a super trainer, given it's got Flight Foam Turbo Plus in the midsole. There's actually a bottom, correct me if I'm wrong, is there a small bottom layer of Flight Foam Blast Plus? Because it's Turbo Plus on the most of the top, and there's a small layer at the very bottom. Am I wrong?
There might be. I honestly don't remember. The first version did, right?
Yeah,
that one did have the turbo and then the blast underneath it. This one, I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. Someone's gonna have to put that in the comments there.
Yep. So the reason I bring this up is because a lot of people that have been asking me about the Metaspeed series for the marathon, and I'm like, especially if you're a recreational runner, I'm like, I don't know if that might be the best option as a recreational runner for the marathon. Superblast is a great option. It's still the lightest super trainer out there. I think it's coming in like the low 8 ounce, like 8.5. Yeah, because it was like, it went up a little bit. It's like 8.5, 8.7 ounces. So still very good weight, still bouncy midsole, very stable. This is probably one of the best super stable neutral shoes out there. So as we've lost lighter weight stability shoes, this has been a really good option because I would easily take this for a marathon, not even hesitate if I had to go run a marathon tomorrow, just because really good sidewalls, wider midfoot, really stiff. Even though there's no plate, it's very stiff. And this is a great shoe because it really stands out from others as the lightest and kind of snappiest, although the Mizuno recent shoe might be on kind of par with being a softer version. Why am I forgetting the name of that?
Neo Vista.
The Neo Vista is bouncy, not quite as light, but definitely super bouncy and kind of in similar vein, but not as stable. And that's where this shoe really sticks out. So as a solid place to line, it does, in theory, have some overlap with things like the Glideride Max or the Magicspeed 4, but when you try them on, it really doesn't. I think it's the best of all these, which it better be the best because it's $200. So if you got some money to spend, it is worth it, in my opinion, because the durability is like phenomenal. I have 150 miles on my pair. There's nowhere. And I guarantee I'm going to get hundreds more and not wear through the outsole. So it really stands out to me as the true super trainer, performance trainer of the entire ASICS lineup for those people that have a little bit more, want the super feel, or like this is a great option for those who run on the Kayano or the GT 2000 or 2000 and want, I want a super marathon shoe, but the Metaspeed series is not enough. This is a really good option. So I think it's worth the money and has a really set place in my opinion. Now, before we go any farther, we also need to talk about the Novablast, which would you categorize this as kind of like the more, I mean, it's not cheap. No, it's $140.
No, it's like 140. It's
you're
very,
right.
Very comparable with a lot of the other trainers. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me have you kind of talk about this one because I think you did better with this shoe than me. But yeah, there's some overlap with a lot of the other shoes, and we'll get into that. But it's also affordable and has a lot of geometrical things that make it a decent performance shoe.
Yeah, I mean, the Novablast 4, and like, again, we were kind of having a hard time categorizing these, you know? It's like we see so many shoes and we're just like, where does this fall, you know? Because I kind of see it, yeah, it's...
it's like, no, go for it, sorry, I'm going to not interrupt you.
But looking at it, it's like, I kind of think it falls in between, where it's not really a true training companion performance shoe, but it's not really a true daily trainer either, and I think that's kind of what they wanted. They wanted kind of this structured, versatile shoe that could kind of do a little bit of everything. I mean, you look at the foam, it's Blast plus Eco, you know, it's 41.5 stack in the heel. Like, it's pretty high up, right? Like, that's higher than the Cumulus, you know, but it's 9.1 ounces. It's a competitive weight. It has pretty good traction. It's built up around the heel and forefoot. It's got sidewalls and sole flare and all that stuff. So it's like, it's got kind of just a little bit of everything kind of Frankensteined into it, you know? And I think for a lot of people, they've actually really responded well to it. I know you have had a little bit of a not quite as good. Sometimes when things get built up too much in those regions, sometimes it can almost be like a little wedge for some people, depending on how they land, especially in the heel. I'm guessing that was your experience. But yeah, it's kind of like the gradual rocker experience with things built up. The Novablast and the Superblast have decently similar platforms. I will say the Superblast has a little bit more sidewalls and a little bit more sole flare, but for the most part, those platforms are decently similar outside of the foam and some small changes. But yeah, and maybe the difference in the foam too, where the Turbo Plus might have a little bit more deformation in the heel and smoothens that out, where like that one might be a little bit more rigid and you get that wedge feeling. I'm not sure as far as your personal experience, but I would say it kind of falls in between. It's a shoe that a lot of people are doing workouts in. A lot of people are running marathons in them too. I mean, you see them, like the Novablast 4 has been a hit and the Superblast 2 has been a hit. They both have been a hit for a lot of people. So yeah, I'm just like, it's not really like what I would choose for a daily trainer. It's not really what I would choose on workout day either, compared to a lot of other shoes, but it's kind of a jack of all trades kind of shoe. And
I feel like it did kind of a better job of what I was hoping out of the Cumulus. The Cumulus at least is good in terms of it's a smooth ride. I think you were alluding to this. My challenge with the Novablast is it feels, and they were trying to do this, where it literally slaps me forward. Like they were looking for this trampoline effect to kind of propel you forwards. And it does that, but the way I hit it is it feels like I'm really getting slappy, and it puts a lot of pressure on my anterior tib to control the front of that shoe forward. But you're totally right. It is incredibly popular. People love this shoe. Either love it or hate it, as I've found. So I'm kind of like, yeah, it's not that I don't like it. I can appreciate it, and it's more stable than it has ever been. for me. It's just a little bit slappy, but it has that versatility of being and plenty of cushioning for being a trainer and also being a lightweight trainer, and a lot of people racing in it. So,
and at the price point.
And at a great price point. So I almost feel like it does a little bit better job than the Cumulus if you want that faster option. Whereas if you want the just like, I just need that classic trainer, the Cumulus, not to say boring isn't the right term, but just you're reliable, you know what you're going to get. And now really rocker shoe, Cumuluses. But if you want something a little more exciting, a little more snappy at that same price point, I think the Novablast is going to compete very well. And we've seen that on the market. But that overlap doesn't exist with the Superblast. Superblast is like its own category. It's like it's been a hit. It's really significant. It's super hard to come by because it flies off the shelves so much, but it's just got such a solid place because it's so unique both in this line and throughout the running industry. Because we'd be like, oh, what's a shoe similar to the Superblast? I'm like, well, kind of the Nia Vista, but not really. And nothing else is that light, and nothing has the stable neutral features that I would like. And
we don't have the specs on that new Addy Zero SL Super
Evo.
The Evo SL. Is that what you're calling it?
We don't. We haven't. As we've had several people. My comment of the day today was somebody was like, "Hey, why haven't you guys reviewed it? Has Matt finally found it on eBay yet?" I'm like,
"Oh, I saw that.
I looked. I haven't found it." Adidas said that they would get it to us, but not right now. And I was like, I have looked. So whoever wrote that, I'm sorry, I forget your name. You're totally right. I don't think so. I think it's close, but it's not going to have the sidewall. And maybe I'm wrong. I'll eat my words if I'm wrong, but it didn't look like it had the sidewall action, although it's definitely got the lighter weight. I don't know if it's as stiff because it's not plated, although the Superblast isn't plated either, but it's so tall and so stiff you would expect it to be. So I don't know. Maybe the Evo SL will, but I will have to see how that goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, did we manage to summarize this whole thing in 40 minutes? That's awesome.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to throw in there? Anything for the fans? Bring the DS racer bag?
Oh, do we want to do what shoes would you like to see in the lineup, or what do you think is redundant? Is that
No. I mean, I think it's a fair topic to be like, is there a little too much crossover on some of these shoes, and maybe what we'd like to see from the company going forward?
Do you want to start?
Sure. I think I'll start off with what I'd like to see going forward. I think they have a gold mine with Turbo Plus as a midsole. You know, I think it is a really, really good foam, and it's a durable feeling foam too. I feel like you can beat the crap out of it and it just keeps responding, which I can't say the same for a lot of the other super foams out there. What I would like to see is actually what we were kind of talking about, kind of like a Metaspeed DS, you know,
Metaspeed DS racer, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I think they nailed it on the GT 2000. I mean, the Kayano was a little much for me, but again, like, their stability line has been doing good. And I think if they could make a super shoe that had just a little bit more structure on it and just a little bit more forgiving, like, that could actually be a really, really good shoe. If nothing else, a training companion that is adequate to that. I mean, the Noosa is decently stable neutral, but something that has just a little bit more on it to accommodate that stability category. And some might say it's a needless shoe. You know, I mean, it doesn't really, it's a very niche shoe, and it's probably one of the reasons why the DS is no longer around. I don't have confirmation on that, but I think for those that would like that and need that, I think they could do a really good job with the materials they currently have and what they're currently playing around with. As far as redundancy, I feel like they almost got to choose a little bit with kind of like the Cumulus and the Glideride Max and the Novablast and these sharp forefoot rockers. The Cumulus was never like this. You know, it was always kind of like your Mizuno Rider, your Brooks Ghosts, your Nike Peg, like these kind of just like neutral high drop trainers, somewhat flexible forefoots, a little bit of reinforcement on the inside. Like, it was a pretty quote unquote traditional build, and they overhauled it, you know, and it's not bad. It's a nice shoe. It's just, it feels like it's starting to fall in line with those other models a little bit. And I almost wish they just kind of kept the Cumulus the Cumulus of the past in some ways. And then you have the Glideride Max, and that's for those who want that, or some of the other things. So I think just playing around and really looking at the models and being like, what is the goal of this shoe? And making sure that it's a very clear answer. I'm just looking over things real quick over the shoes we did cover, and like that's probably the biggest one because they changed the Nimbus over the years, but like not in the same way. Like it's always been a little bit higher up. It's always kind of had a little bit more of a rocker to it. And like they of course they changed like the outsole and the flaring. It's a little bit more structured than it used to be, but I think the Nimbus is still a Nimbus, but the Cumulus isn't really still a Cumulus, So I think just looking at the lines and just making sure to really, make sure the given shoe has a specific goal and experience that the runner wants. And I'm sure they do, but I feel like the water's starting to get muddy.
I would totally agree with you that I'm going to take my, I don't like the Magicspeed 4 and hold off on that for a second. I think this is really good to address that the Cumulus, I feel like kind of lost its identity where it's this kind of weird rockered shoe that in the past had a really specific place that really made sense as that slightly higher drop neutral trainer, that it was really good. It was a little bit lighter, so it was more snappier than some of the other models. Unlike kind of similar to the Wave Rider that was always been a little bit firmer, could pick up the pace. So the Wave Rider has gotten a little bit heavier in recent years, but that's a different story. I would say, especially with the addition of the Glideride Max, which is also more flexible it needs to, the Cumulus is sitting in a weird spot where I think a lot of people are going to choose the Novablast because it's a little more bouncy, a little more snappy, same weight, same price. So I would really figure out what you want to do with the Cumulus. I'd also really figure out what you want to do with the Glideride Max because there's a lot of overlap with the Nimbus. And I think the Nimbus has just done better, even though it's a little bit cheaper. So I think the Glideride Max, if it's going to stay around, they got to go back to what the Glideride was. Maybe this is my bias.
Plate, maybe.
Yeah, this is my bias as a clinician going, I want to make sure we have a really good option for those with toe mobility issues and actually use that rocker. So yeah, you're right. Use a stiffer plate, stiffen that up so that forefoot truly has that rocker that people came to do and love, which is why people were so excited for that shoe to come back. So I think that needs to clean up. The Novablast, I think, has a great place. I think it's that unique lightweight trainer that's versatile. It can handle a lot of different things and people are handling it well. The Magicspeed 4, that they got to figure out the identity. It kind of went to Superblast, but the Superblast is still much better than it is without being too much more expensive. And the carbon fiber plate, it's too firm, too tall. It's just a weird shoe. I think it was a much better option when it was the version 3, and it was this is a really good, almost $100 cheaper comparison to the Metaspeed series for people that want that snappy shoe. They could totally use it for 5K, 10K, half marathon. It really had a place. This one is another thing, kind of like the Cumulus. It lost its identity, so I think it's a little weird. So I think ASICS needs to, the other models are really good. I don't want to poo-poo this. The Nimbus really saw a place, always has, probably always will. The Kayano and GT has a really solid place, always has, probably always will. The Superblast has this very unique place in the market that nobody's been able to touch. And I would say if we don't see a DS racer from them again, I think this is one of the best and lightest, stable, neutral options for people that want to run a marathon. I, really had a great love for the Tempest, but the Superblast to me is better for those that have stability needs that want a super marathon shoe. I think this is a better option. So it's awesome. The Noosa Tri is super unique because it's snappy, light, fast. It's really affordable and can check a lot of boxes. And obviously the Metaspeed series is phenomenal. But Magicspeed 4, Cumulus, Glideride Max really kind of needs to get their identity back, or maybe they need to go personally. So I think there's some really great options. There's some weird overlaps, but we really hope this is helpful for us, or for you, for us to talk to. It's helpful for us. The reason we're going to start doing this with different companies is, again, there's so many different things. We're trying to process this. And along the way, we also want to provide you with information to go, oh my gosh, which way should I go? How much, it's the curse of options. When you have too many options,
right,
you get, what's the decision paralysis? So we really hope this is a helpful episode. We're going to do a couple more of these. You can always find us on the many different platforms and find all these we reviewed. We have reviews of each one of these up on the website. We've got decent amount of video reviews as well. And you can find us anywhere, almost anywhere you can think of. Obviously, Spotify, YouTube is where we put these up, and any of your other podcast type websites. But we also have some really great stuff that comes up, obviously, on the website, which is the OG. We got some good comparison stuff coming up. That's where I'm really excited that we're heading on YouTube. But then we also have the other social platforms. We're on X, we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, all these places you can find us and putting out good content. And great credit to Bach for always managing all this stuff and does a great job. But as always, we really hope this is helpful. In the comments below, let us know what you think about this episode. Our goal is to do more of these, start really summarizing and helping people figure out where in the line they might be interested. But let us know if you have any feedback, any criticism, any positives, let us know. I didn't drop any significant jokes this episode, which I got a lot of great feedback from last time. So we'll try to bring those back next time.
Don't worry, there were some inappropriate jokes that were made right before the.
No, those don't make it on. But
those don't make it on. That would make this show rated R real quick.
We try to keep this clean. But we really hope this helps you, and we really appreciate you listening. Thanks for running along with us, and hope this all helps.